Kapleau. The Three Pillars of Zen. Chapter 2. Yasutani Roshi's Commentary on the Koan Mu. Editor's Introduction. Ever since Chao Chu, one of the great Chinese Zen masters of the Tianjira, retorted Mu to a monk who had asked whether dogs have the Buddha nature, the reverberations of the incident have been echoing through the halls of Zen monasteries and temples down through the centuries. Even in this day no koan is assigned novices more often. It is commonly agreed among Japanese masters that it is unsurpassed for breaking asunder the mind of ignorance and opening the eye of truth. In the Mumonkan, compiled by Zen master Wu Men, Mu heads the collection of 48 koans. What is the source of Mu's power? What has enabled it to hold first rank among koans for over 1,000 years? Whereas such koans as what is the sound of one hand? And what is your face before your parents' birth? Bait the discursive mind and excite the imagination. Mu holds itself coldly aloof from both the intellect and the imagination. Try as it might, reasoning cannot gain even a toehold on Mu. In fact, trying to solve Mu rationally, we are told by the masters, is like trying to smash one's fist through an iron wall. Because Mu is utterly impervious to logic and reason, and in addition is easy to voice. It has proven itself an exceptionally wieldy scalpel for extirpating from the deepest unconscious the malignant growth of I and not I, which poisons the mind's inherent purity and impairs its fundamental wholeness. Every koan is a unique expression of the living, indivisible Buddha nature, which cannot be grasped by the bifurcating intellect. Despite the incongruity of the various elements, koans are profoundly meaningful, each pointing to our own faces before our parents were born, to our real selves. To people who cherish the letter above the spirit, koans appear bewildering. For in their phrasing koans deliberately throw sand into the eyes of the intellect to force us to open our mind's eye and see the world and everything in it undistorted by our concepts and judgments. Koans take as their subjects tangible, down-to-earth objects such as a dog, a tree, a face, a finger to make us see, on the one hand, that each object has absolute value and, on the other, to arrest the tendency of the intellect to anchor itself in abstract concepts. But the import of every koan is the same. That the world is one interdependent whole and that each separate one of us is that whole. The Chinese Zen masters, those spiritual geniuses who created these paradoxical dialogues, did not hesitate to thumb their noses at logic and common sense in their marvelous creations. By wheedling the intellect into attempting solutions impossible for it, koans reveal to us the inherent limitations of the logical mind as an instrument for realizing ultimate truth. In the process they liberate the mind from the snare of language, which fits over experience like a straitjacket. Pry us loose from our tightly held dogmas and prejudices. Strip us of our penchant for discriminating good from bad. And empty us of the false notion of self and other, to the end that we may one day perceive that the world of perfection is in fact no different from that in which we eat and excrete, laugh and weep. When Zen master Chung Feng was asked why the teachings of the Buddhas and ancestral teachers were called koans, he replied, "The koans do not represent the private opinion of a single individual, but rather the highest principle. This principle accords with the spiritual source, tallies with the mysterious meaning, destroys birth and death, and transcends the passions. It cannot be understood by logic. It cannot be transmitted in words. It cannot be explained in writing. It cannot be measured by reason. For the essentials of complete transcendence, final emancipation, total penetration, and identical attainment, nothing can surpass the koan." Quote, "The great merit of koans, which range over the vast area of the Mahayana teachings, is that they compel us, in ingenious and often dramatic fashion, to learn these doctrines not simply with our head but with our whole being, refusing to permit us to sit back and endlessly theorize about them in the abstract. What Heinrich Zimmer says about certain types of meditation is especially true of koans, the spirit of which must be demonstrated before the Roshi and not merely explained. Knowledge is the reward of action, for it is by doing things that one becomes transformed. Executing a symbolical gesture, actually living through, to the very limit, a particular role, one comes to realize the truth inherent in the role. Suffering its consequences, one fathoms and exhausts its contents. It must not be supposed, however, that one reaches this point easily or without a generous measure of frustration and even desperation. In his Zen comments on the Mumonkan, contemporary Zen master Shibayana quotes his teacher on the function of the koan. Suppose here is a completely blind man who trudges along leaning on his stick and depending on his intuition. The role of the koan is to mercilessly take the stick away from him and to push him down after turning him around. Now the blind man has lost his sole support and intuition and will not know where to go or how to proceed. He will be thrown into the abyss of despair. In this same way, the koan will mercilessly take away all our intellect and knowledge. In short, the role of the koan is not to lead us to satori easily, but on the contrary to make us lose our way and drive us to despair. Quote, "The complete solution of a koan involves the movement of the mind from a state of ignorance to the vibrant inner awareness of living truth. This implies the emergence into the field of consciousness of the immaculate body-mind, which is the reverse of the mind of delusion. The determination to struggle with a koan in the first place is generated by faith in the reality of the body-mind. The struggle itself being the effort of this mind to cast off the shackles of ignorance and come to its own self-knowledge." The present commentary was made by Zen master Yasutani, without notes, to about 35 laymen and women at a session in. It is reproduced here in translation exactly as he gave it except for minor editing of the few repetitious or awkward expressions which inevitably creep into extemporaneous speech. In its clarity and incisiveness, in the inspiration, encouragement, and guidance it provides the novice and advanced student alike, it stands as a masterly commentary on this time-honored koan. A vivid, penetrating commentary, apart from the comment accompanying the koan, is invaluable for aspirants who wish to utilize a koan as their spiritual exercise. Besides familiarizing them with the backgrounds of the dramatis personae and setting forth in contemporary language obscure terms and metaphorical allusions common to the vernacular of ancient China, in which the koans and comments are couched, it thrusts before students in terse, vigorous language the spirit of the koan. One lacking this orientation very likely would find the koan alien if not bizarre. Since the commentary is not an ordinary lecture or sermon addressed to all and sundry but an integral part of Zen training, it is usually given only at session and essentially for the benefit of those who come to practice zazen. In the monastery the commentary, which takes place at least once and frequently twice a day, is announced by the solemn tolling of the hansho, among the largest of the drums, bells, and gongs employed in Zen. At its signal all file into the main hall from the zazen hall and, dividing into two groups facing each other at right angles to the altar, seat themselves on the tatami mats in the traditional Japanese sitting position. The roshi then makes his appearance escorted by an attendant, who carries his book of koans wrapped in a piece of silk ceremonial cloth both as a mark of respect and for protection. All present bow their heads in humility before their teacher as he proceeds to the butsudan to light a stick of incense and place it before the image of the Buddha. Then, led by the teacher, everyone rises, faces the butsudan, and prostrates 3 times. These devotions of gratitude, reverence, and humility toward the Buddha and the ancestral teachers having been completed, the master seats himself on a large cushion on a dais facing the butsudan, crosses his legs in the lotus posture, and leads the group in chanting a short selection from a sutra. He is now ready to begin his commentary. Like the chanted sutra which precedes it, the commentary is an offering to the Buddha, and this in fact is the significance of the Zen teachers facing the butsudan and not his hearers during the delivery of his commentary. In addressing himself to the Buddha he is in effect saying, "This is my expression of the truth of your teachings. I offer it up to you in the hope you will find it satisfactory. Quote. The commentary is not an erudite discourse on the meaning of the koan. For the teacher knows that explanations, no matter how intricate or subtle, cannot lead to that inner understanding which alone enables one to demonstrate the spirit of the koan with certainty and conviction. Zen teachers in fact look upon mere definitions and explanations as dry and lifeless, and as ultimately misleading because inherently limited. The one word, imbecile, uttered from the guts conveys more than any 100 words defining it. Nor does the teacher burden listeners with a purely philosophical lecture on Buddhist doctrine or on the metaphysical nature of ultimate reality. The Zen teacher's object is to relive the spirit and drama of the koan, to bring alive through charged words and gestures the truth inherent in the roles of the various protagonists. Keenly aware of the different levels of comprehension of his hearers, he pitches his commentary so that each receives according to his or her capacity to understand, even as he relates the spirit of the koan to his hearers' common life experiences. In Zen parlance, the Roshi strikes against the koan from his hara, trusting that the emitted sparks of truth will illumine the minds of his hearers. It is from the hara, then, that the teacher must deliver the commentary if it is to glow with the spirit and force of his entire being. And similarly it is in their hara that his hearers must focus their minds if they are to grasp and absorb directly and whole the palpitating truth he is thrusting at them. Listening to the commentary is actually another form of zazen, that is, a state of uninterrupted concentration leading to total absorption. Hence the concentrated mind must not be disrupted by the taking of notes or by otherwise diverting the eyes from the sitting stance. In a monastery where the discipline is strict, the head monks will reprimand beginners who attempt to make notes or whose eyes wander about the hall to look at other sitters. Particularly for one whose spiritual exercise is a koan. The commentary, by providing numerous clues, presents an unparalleled opportunity for gaining direct insight into the koan's essential import. If the student has succeeded in exhausting all thoughts through single-minded concentration and has achieved absolute oneness with the koan, one telling phrase uttered by the teacher may be the golden arrow which suddenly and unpredictably finds its mark, tearing asunder the innermost cloak of darkness and suffusing the mind with light and inner understanding. For one whose mind is not yet ripe, in other words, still enveloped in delusive thoughts, the commentary is a rich source of pointers for future practice. But for all, no matter what the state of their minds, a trenchant commentary provides inspiration and encouragement. Upon completion of this talk, the Roshi quietly closes the Book of Koans as all chant the 4 vows together. At no time during or after the commentary are questions solicited or encouraged. Zen teaching frowns on all theoretical questions as not conducive to direct, first-hand experience of the truth. This attitude can be traced back to the Buddha, who held to a noble silence whenever asked such questions as, are the universe and soul finite or infinite? Does the sunt exist after death or not? And Zen Buddhism, which is the quintessence of the Buddha's teaching, likewise refuses to deal with questions that ultimately have no answers, or with questions the answers to which can only be understood by a mind bathed in the light of full consciousness, that is, perfect enlightenment. When abstract, theoretical questions are asked during Dokusan, the teacher frequently throws them back at the questioner, to try to make the student see the source from which they issue and to relate her or him to that source. But there are further reasons why abstract questions are viewed with disfavor. A preoccupation with them not only tends to take the place of zazen and the understanding it alone can lead to, but by titillating the intellect they make immeasurably more difficult the stilling and emptying of the mind essential for kensho. The Buddha's classic reply to a monk who threatened to abandon the religious life unless the Buddha answered his questions or whether the sunt exists after death or not is worth repeating. It is as if a man had been wounded by an arrow thickly smeared with poison, and his friends and companions, his relatives and kinsfolk were to procure for him a physician or surgeon. and the sick man were to say, I will not have this arrow taken out until I have learnt whether the man who wounded me belonged to the warrior caste or to the Brahmin caste. Learnt whether he was tall, short, or of middle height. Was black, dusky, or of yellow skin. Was from this or that village or town or city. Whether it was an ordinary arrow or a claw-headed arrow, that man would die without ever having learnt this. Quote. And in another dialogue the Buddha stated, the religious life does not depend on the dogma that the world is eternal or not eternal, infinite or finite, that the soul and the body are identical or different, or the dogma that the saint exists or does not exist after death. It profits not, nor has it to do with the fundamentals of religion, nor does